All right, the smoke is ready to go up, and a lot of people are asking the question, what's it all about? How does the Catholic Church select its pope? Welcome back to the desk of Dr. Dandridge. I'm Dr. Dandridge, and today we're diving into a fascinating topic, the process of how the Catholic Church selects a pope. Now, many people have heard of the white smoke rising from the Vatican, signaling the selection of a new leader. But what actually happens behind those closed doors? How does the church universal is what the Catholic Church is, considered to be, but how does the church determine who will lead over 1 billion Catholics worldwide? Let's break it down today. All right. The Pope overall is the spiritual leader of the Roman Catholic Church and ultimately is the Bishop of Rome. Another point of I guess you could say, trivial knowledge is that, did you know that the Vatican, where the Pope actually stays, is actually like its own country? Like, it has its own governmental system. It's kind of like the coolest thing out there. But here's the thing. The role of the papacy, or the role of the Pope, actually traces back to Saint Peter, whom Catholics believed was appointed by Jesus himself as the first leader of the church. Now, over the centuries, the method for selecting a pope has evolved. But today it follows a very structured as well as a highly secretive process known as the Papal Conclave. Now, the conclave takes place after the death or the resignation of a pope. And until a new pope is chosen, the church is led by the Camerlengo, or the cardinal who oversees this transition period. But once the time comes to elect the new leader, the process moves to the historic Sistine Chapel. So let's look at what this conclave process looks like. A lot of people ask the question, how does the Catholic Church actually elect a new pope? Well, the process unfolds in a very carefully structured manner. There are very specific steps that take place. Now, we don't know what happens behind the closed doors, but we do know how the process works. The first thing that happens is that the cardinals gather. Now, I'm sure you're probably like, why are all the birds getting together? I'm not talking about the cardinals as far as the birds. No, this is actually one of the hierarchical positions inside of the Catholic Church. Okay, so you have your priest, you have your father, you have your bishops, you have your archbishops, you have your cardinals, and then you have the Pope, just to kind of give it inside of retrospect. But the cardinals gather. These are the higher ranking religious leaders inside of the Catholic Church. Okay. Now, what's interesting as far as the cardinals who do gather is that only cardinals under the age of 80 are eligible to vote. Now, to be quite frank, I don't know if, and I'm gonna have to find this out, I don't know if cardinals above the age of 80 are in the room and kind of, going through conversation and going through the dialogue process. Actually, matter of fact, I'm gonna have to find that out. But only cardinals under the age of 80 are eligible to vote. And typically, it's around 120 cardinals that participate inside of the election of the Pope. They come from literally all over the world. And one of the things that you see, and it's typically covered inside of media, is you'll begin to see all of the cardinals from all the various countries and all the various parishes from around the world. They all come and they gather in Rome. And they also, as soon as they get there, they take an oath of secrecy before entering the conclave. What happens after the arrival and the gathering of the cardinals? Well, they go into seclusion, but not just anywhere. They go into seclusion inside of the Sistine Chapel. The cardinals are literally locked inside of the chapel to ensure that there is no outside influence that affects their decision. I mean, you might have seen it inside of some movies where, they all walk in and they have their robes on and whatnot, and they all sit down and then the door is locked. That's exactly what happens. There are no phones. There is no internet. There is no contact with the outside world. The only thing that happens inside of the Sistine Chapel is prayer, discussion, and voting. Now, I remember back in the day, I can't remember which pope it was, but it took days upon days for them to come to a consensus, because here's the thing. There is a voting process that takes place for the papacy. All right. What happens is that each cardinal writes the name of their chosen candidate on a ballot. Now, I'm not sure as to how candidates are selected. I don't know if you kind of go in and either nominate yourself or somebody nominates you, or, maybe God comes down or Jesus comes down or Mary comes down and says, hey, I might want this person, I might want that person. I don't know how like the final candidates come about. I would almost think that it would kind of be like your regular I guess you could say election inside of most diplomatic places, where I guess if you want to be the Pope, you put your name inside of the pot. If somebody wants to elect you as the Pope, they might put your name inside of the pot. But I'm really unsure as to how the candidates are chosen and even how they get down to, for lack of better words, the final three. But here's the thing. What happens inside of the voting process is that the ballots are collected, they are counted, and then all the ballots are burned after each round. And the rule with regards to, quote unquote, winning the papacy or winning the ability to become the Pope is that a candidate must receive 2/3 of the votes to be elected as Pope. All right. So essentially 66%. You've got to get a 66% majority in order for you to be elected as Pope. Now, the only thing that we really see as far as the public is the smoke signals. One of the things that you see during the selection of the Pope is that there are devout Catholics who are outside of the Sistine Chapel, and they are watching, for lack of better words, because I have no other way to describe it, they're literally watching this chimney. And they're watching as each time smoke comes out, what color it will be, whether or not it will be white or whether or not it will be black. Now, here's the significance, because if no candidate reaches the required votes, the ballots are typically burned with a chemical that produces black smoke. And this signals to the public that no decision has been made. So you got to imagine, you got people, literally thousands of people outside of the Sistine Chapel, and they're looking up at this chimney. And, as soon as they see black smoke, they automatically know that a Pope has not been selected. But now when a Pope is elected, the ballots are burned with a chemical that produces white smoke, signaling that the world has a new Pope, a new leader has been chosen. Oftentimes inside of the past, when you see the white smoke coming up, you see this jubilant response from all of the devotees that are outside that have been waiting, and the rejoicing. And then there are some, I guess you could say, ceremonies that take place afterwards where they actually come out and begin to announce who the new Pope is going to be. Okay. Now, the process of selecting a Pope isn't just about voting. No, it's a deeply spiritual process. And the Catholic Church believes that the election is guided by the Holy Spirit. This is connected to Proverbs 16:9, where it says, in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. This is what it relates to. And for the cardinals, we've seen inside of media and, culture and religion that sometimes this becomes a political decision. But for the most part, it's more than just a political decision. No, it's also a matter of faith, because what happens inside of this conclave is that they spend time in prayer, seeking divine guidance to ensure that they choose the right leader for the church. Keep in mind that the Pope is essentially the head of the Catholic Church and has, quote unquote, this almost direct connection to God. The chosen Pope then has to accept his role and chooses a papal name. Now, what is a papal name? So like I said earlier, Pope Francis, his name originally was Giorgioli or something along those lines. And he chose the name of Pope Francis in order to signify the type of, I guess you could say, leader that he was going to be. oftentimes when the Pope chooses their name, their new name, it is often inspired by either past popes or saints. And what the name is connected to, it essentially symbolizes the kind of leadership that he hopes to provide while he sits inside of the chair of the papacy. All right. So this ancient and sacred process holds this important lesson for all of us. All right. Leadership isn't just about power. No, it's about purpose. And what I really want you to do is to think about your own life. When you're making decisions, do you seek wisdom? We talked about wisdom inside of one of the previous lessons, and the fact that wisdom is knowledge and experience that is essentially brought together. And how we're judging things is oftentimes how wisdom is manifested. Do we take time? Can we see from here how we can learn how to take time to reflect? Or do we rush into things without consideration? I love how when the Catholic Church is choosing the papacy that they literally don't rush it. It's not like they go in for jury duty. It's not like they're going in saying, okay, who wants to be the Pope? Okay, you. And then they're, sending up smoke. No, it doesn't work like that. They're actually very, very deliberate about how they're making their consideration. And I really think that is something that we can probably all learn from. Whether you're leading family, a church, or simply your own life, we can all learn from patience and prayerfulness with regards to the conclave. So here is your assignment for the week. All right, as we're making these contemporary connections. The next time that you face an important decision, step back like the conclave and begin to review what wisdom looks like. Remember, what prayer and meditation and just connecting with the divine looks like. And then ultimately wait for clarity. All right. I hope this lesson gives a deeper understanding of how the Catholic Church selects its leader, and maybe also even a lesson on decision making for your own life. If you found this insightful, do me a favor, share this with somebody. Let's keep this conversation going with regards to faith, history, and spiritual growth. Thank you for joining me at my desk. I'm Dr. Dandridge. Just want to remind each of you that great decisions require great discernment.